All right. Welcome to Pace Studios. We are here with Alexander and Alexandra Andereel, the collective authors Lars Kepler, who are the authors of the #1 international bestseller, The Sandman, which is getting its U.S. release today. Guys, thanks so much for being here. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. We are so excited to be here sharing this reading with you.
Well, we'd love to, let's dive into it right now. I'd love to hear a passage from the book.
Yes.
Yeah.
So the Sandman starts when a young man is found on a railway bridge in the middle of a snowstorm. The police take him to the hospital. He's in bad shape, totally confused. And when they run him through the system, they find out that he's been declared dead years ago.
Yeah, it was the serial killer, Ulrich Walter, who took him and his sister many years earlier, just before Detective Inspector Jonah Linna caught him. And now, the young man tells the police that his sister is still alive, but he has no idea where they have been kept all these years.
Yeah, because Ulrich Walter serves a life sentence in solitary confinement.
Yeah, and nobody listened to Jonah Linna, the detective inspector, way back when he said that Ulrich Walter had an accessory. Now it turns out he was right.
So except for this unknown accessory, Ulrich Walter is the only one who knows where the sister is being kept. This is not an easy decision, but the National Operations Department decides to send in Special Agent Saga Bauer on an undercover mission, posing as a patient in the same ward as Ulrich Walter. The Sandman, Chapter 1. I have to put on my glasses. The steel gate closes behind the new doctor with a heavy clang. The sound echoes down the spiral staircase. Everything suddenly goes quiet, and Anders Rönn feels a shiver run down his spine. Today is his first day working in the Secure Criminal Psychology Unit at Löwenströmska Hospital. For the past 13 years, the strictly isolated bunker has been the home for the aging Ulrich Walter. The young doctor doesn't know much about his patient except the diagnosis: schizophrenia, non-specific, chaotic thinking, recurrent acute psychosis with erratic and extremely violent episodes. Anders shows his ID at the entrance, removes his cell phone, and hangs a key to the gate in his locker before the guard opens the first steel security door. He goes in and waits for the door to close before walking to the next door. When a signal sounds, the guard opens the second door. Anders walks along the corridor toward the isolation ward's staff room. Chief physician Roland Brolin is the thickest man of his 50s with sloping shoulders and cropped hair. He's smoking under the exhaust fan in the kitchen. Ulrich Walter must never be alone with any member of the staff, he says. He must never meet other patients. He never has any visitors, and he's never allowed into the exercise yard, nor is never. And she asks, surely it's not policy to keep someone? No, it isn't, Roland says. So what has he actually done? Nothing but nice things, Roland says, heading toward the corridor. Even though Ulrich Walter has committed the most heinous crimes of any serial killer in Swedish history, he is completely unknown to the public. The proceedings against him in the Central Courthouse at the Court of Appeal were behind closed doors, and all the files are strictly confidential. Anders and Roland pass through another security door, and a young woman with a tattooed arms and pierced cheeks winks at them. Come back in one piece, she says cheerily. There's no need to worry, Roland says to Anders. Ulrich Walter is a quiet elderly man. He doesn't fight, and he doesn't raise his voice. Our cardinal rule is that we never go into his cell. But the guard who was on the night shift last night noticed that he had made some sort of knife and hidden it under his mattress. So obviously we have to confiscate it. Oh, how do we do that? Anders asks. We break the rules. We're going into your cell. You're going in to ask nicely for the knife. I'm going in. Roland laughs loudly and explains that they're going to pretend to give the patient his normal injection of risperidone, but will actually be giving him an overdose of Cypadrea. The chief runs his card through yet another reader and taps in a code. There's a beep, and the lock of the security door whirs. Wait, Roland says, holding out a little box of yellow air plugs. What are these for? Roland looks at his new colleague with a weary eyes and sighs. Jurek Walter will talk to you quite calmly, probably perfectly reasonable, he says in a grey voice. He will convince you to do some things you'll regret. His words will play in your head, in your mind, over and over again. And later this evening, when you're driving home, you will swerve into oncoming traffic and smash into a semi. Or you will stop off at the hardware store and buy an axe before you pick up the kids from preschool. Should I be scared now? Anders smiles and puts a pair of the earplugs in his pocket. No, but hopefully you'll be careful, Roland says. Chapter 2. The last security door closes and they head down the corridor to the isolation cells. The fluorescent light in the ceiling reflects off in the linoleum floor. The textured wallpaper has a grove worn into from the rail of a food cart. Roland puts his pass card away and lets Anders walk ahead of him toward the heavy metal door. Through the reinforced glass, Anders can see a thin man sitting on a plastic chair. He's dressed in blue jeans and a denim shirt. The man is clean-shaven, his eyes seem remarkably calm. The many wrinkles covering his pale face look like the cracked clay at the bottom of a dried-up riverbed. Jurek Walter was found guilty of only 2 murders and 1 attempted murder, but there's compelling evidence linking him to 19 others. 13 years ago, he was caught red-handed in Liljans forest on Djurgården in Stockholm, forcing a 50-year-old woman back into a coffin in the ground. She had been kept in the coffin for almost 2 years, but was still alive. The woman has sustained terrible injuries. She was malnourished, her muscles had withered away. She had appalling pressure sores and frostbite, and she had suffered severe brain damage. If the police hadn't followed and arrested Jurek Walter beside the coffin, he might never have been stopped. Now Roland takes out 3 small glass bottles containing yellow powder, puts some saline into each of the bottles, shakes them carefully, and draws the content into a syringe. He puts his earplugs in and opens the small hatch in the door. There's a clatter of metal, and a heavy smell of concrete and dust hits them. In a dispassionate voice, Roland tells Jurek it's time for his injection. The man lifts his chin and gets up softly from the chair, turns to look at the hatch in the door, and unbuttons his shirt as he approaches. Stop and take off your shirt, Roland says. Jurek steps slowly forward and Roland quickly closes the hatch. Jurek stops, undoes the last buttons, and lets his shirt fall to the floor. His body looks as if it had once been in good shape, but now his muscles are loose and his wrinkled skin is sagging. Roland opens the hatch again. Jurek approaches and holds out his arm. And Anders washes his upper arm with rubbing alcohol. Roland pushes the syringe into the soft muscle and injects the liquid too quickly. Jurek's hand jerks in surprise, but he doesn't pull his arm back until he's been given permission. Roland hurriedly bolts the hatch, removes his earplugs, smiles nervously to himself, and then looks inside. Jurek is stumbling toward the bed, where he stops and sits down. Suddenly, he twists to look at the door, and Roland drops the syringe. He tries to catch it, but it rolls away across the floor. Anders steps forward and picks up the syringe, and when they both stand and turn back towards the cell, they see that the inside of the reinforced glass is misted. Jurek Walter has breathed on the glass and written Jonah with his finger. "What does it say?" Anders asked weakly. "He's written Jonah. What the hell does that mean?" When the condensation clears, they see that Jurek Walter is sitting as if he hasn't moved. He looks at the arm where he got the injection, massages the muscle, and then looks at them through the glass. He didn't say anything else? No. There's a bestial roar from the other side of the heavy door. Jurek has slid off the bed and is on his knees, screaming. The sinews in his neck are taut and his veins swollen. "How much did you give him?" Anders asks. Jurek's eyes roll back and turn white. He reaches out a hand to support himself and stretches one leg but topples over backwards. He hits his head on the bedside table. Then he screams. His body jerks spasmodically. "Jesus Christ," Anders whispers. Jurek slips onto the floor, his legs kicking uncontrollable. He bites his tongue and blood sprays out over his chest. He lies there on his back, gasping. "What do we do if he dies?" "Cremate him," Roland says. Jurek is cramping again, his whole body is shaking, and his hands flail in every direction until they suddenly stop. Roland looks at his watch. Sweat is running down his cheeks. Jurek Walter whimpers, rolls onto his side and tries to get up, but fails. "You can go inside in a couple of minutes," Roland says. "Am I really going in there?" "He'll soon be completely harmless." Jurek is crawling on all fours, blood and slime drooling from his mouth. He sways and slows down until he finally slumps to the floor and lies still.
Chapter 3. Anders looks through the thick reinforced glass window in the door. Jurek Walter has been lying motionless on the floor for the last 10 minutes. His body goes limp as the cramps subside. Roland pulls out a key and puts it in the lock, then pauses and peers in through the window before unlocking the door. "Have fun," he says. "What do we do if he wakes up?" Anders asks. "He mustn't wake up." Roland opens the door and Anders goes inside. The door closes behind him and the lock rattles. The cell smells of sweat and something else as well, a sharp smell of vinegar. Jurek Walter lies completely still, breathing slowly. Anders keeps his distance from him, even though he knows he's unconscious. The acoustics in there are odd, claustrophobic, as if sounds follow movements too quickly. His doctor's coat rustles softly with each step. Jurek is breathing faster. The tap is dripping in the sink. Anders reaches the bed, then turns toward Jurek and kneels down. He catches a glimpse of Roland watching him anxiously through the reinforced glass as he leans over and tries to look under the fixed bed. Nothing on the floor. He moves closer, looking carefully at Jurek before lying flat on the floor. He can't watch Jurek any longer. He has to turn his back on him to look for the knife. Not much light reaches under the bed. Dust balls line the wall. He can't help imagining that Jurek Walter has opened his eyes. He sees something tucked between the wooden slats and the mattress. It's hard to tell what it is. Anders stretches out his hand but can't reach it. He'll have to slide beneath the bed on his back. The space is so tight he can't turn his head. He slips farther in, feels the unyielding bulk of the bed frame against his rib cage with each breath. His fingers fumble. He needs to get a bit closer. His knee hits one of the wooden slats. He blows a dust ball away from his face and carries on. Suddenly he hears a dull thud behind him in the cell. He can't turn around and look. He just lies there still, listening. His own breathing is so rapid, he has trouble discerning any other sound. Cautiously, he reaches out his hand and touches the object with his fingertips, squeezing in a bit farther in order to pull it free. Jurek has fashioned a short knife with a very sharp blade from a piece of steel skirting. "Hurry up!" Roland calls through the hatch. Anders tries to get out, pushing hard, and scratches his cheek. Suddenly he can't move. He's stuck. His coat is caught, and there's no way he can wriggle out of it. He imagines he can hear the sound of shuffling from Jurek. Perhaps it was nothing. Anders pulls as hard as he can. The seams strain but don't tear. He realizes that he's going to have to slide back under the bed to free his coat. "What are you doing?" Roland calls in a brittle voice. The little hatch in the door clatters as it is bolted shut again. Anders sees that one pocket of his coat has caught on a loose strut. He quickly pulls it free, holds his breath, and pushes himself out again. He is filled with a rising sense of panic. He scrapes his stomach and knee, but grabs the edge of the bed with one hand and pulls himself out. Panting, he turns around and gets unsteadily to his feet with a knife in his hand. Jurek is lying on his side, one eye half open in sleep, staring blindly. Anders hurries over to the door. He meets the chief's anxious gaze through the reinforced glass and tries to smile, but stress cuts through his voice. "Open the door!" Roland Brolin opens the hatch instead. "Pass me the knife first." Anders gives him a quizzical look, then hands the knife over. "You found something else as well," Roland Brolin says. "No," Anders replies, glancing at Jurek. "A letter." "There wasn't anything else." Jurek is starting to writhe on the floor, gasping weakly. "Check his pockets," the chief says. "What for?" "Because this is a search." Anders turns and walks cautiously to Jurek Walter. His eyes are completely shut again, but beads of sweat are starting to appear on his furrowed face. Reluctantly, Anders leans over and feels inside one of his pockets. The denim shirt pulls tighter across Jurek's shoulders, and he lets out a low groan. There's a plastic comb in the back pocket of his jeans. With trembling hands, Anders checks the rest of his pockets. Sweat is dripping from the tip of his nose. He has to keep blinking hard. One of Jurek's big hands opens and closes several times. There's nothing else in his pockets. Anders hears a distant alarm and turns back toward the reinforced glass. It's impossible to see if Roland is standing outside the door. The reflection of the lamp in the ceiling is shining like a grey sun in the glass. He has to get out now. It's taken too long. Anders gets to his feet and hurries over to the door. Roland isn't there. Jurek Walter is breathing fast, like a child having a nightmare. Anders bangs on the door. His hands thud almost soundlessly against the thick metal. He bangs again. There's no sound. Nothing is happening. He taps on the glass with his wedding ring, then sees a shadow growing across the wall. Anders feels a shiver run up his back and down his arms. With his heart pounding and his adrenaline rising, he turns around. He sees Jurek Walter slowly sitting up. His face is slack and his pale eyes are staring straight ahead. His mouth is still bleeding and his lips look strangely red. 4. Jurek Walter is sitting on the floor and blinks at Anders a few times before he starts to get up. It's a lie, Jurek says, dribbling blood down his chin. They say I'm a monster, but I'm just a human being. He doesn't have the energy to stand and slumps back, panting, onto the floor. A human being, he repeats. He puts one trembling hand inside his shirt, pulls out a folded piece of paper and tosses it over toward Anders. The letter he was asking for, he says. For the past 7 years, I've been asking to see a lawyer. Not because I have any hope of getting out. I am who I am, but I'm still a human being. Anders crouches down and reaches for the piece of paper without taking his eyes off Jurek. The crumpled man tries to get up again, leaning on his hands, and although he sways slightly, he manages to put one foot down on the floor. Anders picks up the paper from the floor and finally hears a rattling sound as a key is inserted into the lock of the door. He turns and stares out through the reinforced glass, feeling his legs shake beneath him. You shouldn't have given me an overdose, Jurek mutters. Open, open, Anders thinks. He hears breathing behind his back. The door slides open and Anders stumbles out of the cell, straight into the concrete wall of the corridor. He hears a heavy clang as the door shuts, then a rattle as the powerful lock responds to the turn of the key. The alarm sounded, and the door to the cell automatically locked, so I had to go override it, Roland says. This is insane. Did you find anything more? Roland asks. Just the knife, Anders says. So he didn't give you anything? No. It would be better if you gave it to me. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, that was outstanding. That was a very intense first 4 chapters of The Sandman, which is the #1 international bestseller from the Swedish crime writing duo Lars Kepler. Alexandra, thanks so much for being here. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
And if you like what you heard, hopefully you did, this book is getting its U.S. premiere today, so it's available at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, your favorite independent local bookseller. It's everywhere today. Congratulations on the release.
Thank you. We are so excited.
All right. Well, come back and see us next time. We've got another passage to read. Love to host you here anytime.
Oh.